welcome everybody. Thanks, Sam, for coming and
pleasure.
Doing your little turn.
We decided tonight's going to be a face-off between Bourne and Bond. let the action begin.
Oh my God. Well, let's just orientate ourselves. We had lunch a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
In New York, and you said, "What the fuck's the story with this Bond? What do you think?" So tell me, what led you to do it? What was the sort of thinking?
Well, Paul and I met in, I think you were doing a junket for Green Zone?
I was.
Yeah. And I thought, it was on the cards, Bond was on the cards, and I thought I should talk to someone who's actually taken on one of these enormous juggernauts. And you were incredibly inspiring, actually, because you just said, you just got to do it. You'd be crazy not to do it. It'll shake you up, it'll change the way you do things, but also it'll wake you up and it'll be fun. But you've got to throw yourself right into the middle of it. At least that's the message I got from it.
Don't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. But you see, he likes a glass ball, so he was actually completely legless when he told me. For me, it was exactly that, really. At the end of the day, I needed to try and find a way to shake myself out of some of the habits I got into, and I wanted a challenge, and I wanted to be scared again by things that I didn't know how they worked entirely. I wanted to take on action. I was aware that there would be a sense that it was an unexpected choice for me to do it, and that kind of got me going a bit. It was a chance to come back to England. I hadn't made a movie in England, English obviously, and I'd made 5, more by accident than design in a way, 5 American pictures back to back really, and I wanted to work with Daniel again, and I wanted to work with Judi Dench again, and so all of those things sort of, it just felt like the right timing. And you know as well as anyone that so much of this business is about timing. 5 years earlier, and I never would have done it. I wouldn't have even contemplated it, weirdly. And so to say nothing about the movies or the franchise, it just would have been what I wanted to do at the time. And it's something I've already mentioned in various interviews that that Daniel asked me whether he thought it was a good idea for him to play Bond, and I said no. I thought he would it would be a disaster for his career, it would always be known as Bond, and also in my head I just thought by that time I simply equated Bond with Pierce and with Roger Moore, and with a kind of urbane, a kind of sense of pastiche, self-referential gagginess that seemed to be completely unlike Daniel and Daniel's persona, Daniel's energy and his weird rage and his excitement as an actor. And then about 30 seconds into Casino Royale, I thought I was completely wrong. And by the way, I can say this over and over again, without Casino Royale, without the work that Martin Campbell and Daniel did on that movie, this movie that we made is completely impossible. It's interesting talking to Paul outside, because we were talking about the first Bourne movie and how, I feel I've got a lot of credit for some of the stuff that Martin did in Casino Royale, because really he did the hard job, because he took away pastiche, he took away all the things I just talked about, and he brought back a character that you cared about in a different way. And he leveled the playing field and took it back to sea level, as it were. And then made it possible for us to reintroduce Q, and now you've seen it, Moneypenny, and some of the humour exactly that had been there, but now kind of we found it again on Daniel's terms really, and on mine, so all of those things went into the choice to do.
And talk about, because the thing with these films is always the screenplay, and so many of these big franchise movies are made arse about tip. They start by saying, we are releasing this movie next July, off you go.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because
you obviously managed to get...
I wasn't offered the Avengers movie, but I got one of those submission letters from CAA, and it wasn't a script, it was an enormous stack of, it was like just a huge comic book, lots of comic books. And the geek in me thought, oh good, comics, I can read them on the loo. But instead the cover sheet said, Marvel's The Avengers will be released May the 3rd, 2012. And then it described the movie. The first sentence of the cover sheet was the release date. Before it said anything, I'm not a Marvel fan, so I didn't know what the Avengers were. And then I gathered from the material that it was all linked together. But it's interesting that so often it's the case that Paul says that you're told when the movie's coming out before you're told what it actually is. You know, it's got to that point now. We had a great stroke of luck on this movie, which is that in the middle of pre-production, effectively, before I was even announced as director, the whole of MGM went into bankruptcy, and the movie was postponed indefinitely, as you might have read if you're interested in following these things. And so we had a 9-month hiatus, and although we were not supposed to legally work on the movie, actually that's when we worked on the script. And it's depressing if you're a studio or a producer who wants to make a movie within a year, but the truth is it takes a year to write a good script, and then you can start pre-production, and that's what it took us on this. And there is no way, as Paul says, that without Rob and Neal, and particularly John Logan, we would have had anything like the movie that we have. It was entirely, the blueprint was all on the page, and everything that I think is unusual in the film, for example, Javier's performance, it was all down there on paper, and you took it then, you could take it, you had a solid launching pad to the next level. But without those words, it's a very verbal character, he would have been nowhere. And by the way, he wouldn't have said yes to it anyway. I mean, one of the reasons the casting was good is because we had a script that we could actually send them, and they thought, yeah, I'll play that. Rafe thought, I'll have a go at that.
So you had this triangle at the moment.
Yes. I mean, I was very conscious, because again, you've seen it now, so I can talk about this, but I've not been able really to talk about the fact that the one idea that we were very set on from the very beginning was that this was Emma's last film, and was going to die. So that we knew we were building to that moment throughout. So everything in it was really, in a sense, the secret film, as it were, was a meditation on death and loss. That was the given. Now we understand, and aging. Now we understand that the story is really about aging, about the old and the new guard coming in under the old, and where Bond sits in that. Is he too old? Is he finished? Is he done? Or is he going to be replaced in the centre of it again? Now we can start reintroducing the things that you expect from a Bond movie. Yes, of course there's going to be action sequences, of course there's going to be girls, locations, a villain, what have you. But they're all in support of this one story. And so that was the centre of it from the beginning, was, okay, Judy's going to die, there's going to have to be a new M. It's much more interesting to introduce a new M if we don't see it coming, so we have to introduce him as a potentially dark figure, so we need an actor skilled enough to be able to transform gradually an audience's perception of the character, scene by scene as the movie progresses, until at the end, we hope, you're pleased that it's him. And so, although Rafe every day was like, they're going to hate me, they're going to absolutely hate me. I'm the person responsible for Judy. No, I'm the person responsible. You're okay, you're just going to, So, but I think he was also terrified. Rafe was terrified that he was going to. I called him up and said, "Can I take you out to lunch? I need to talk to you about the Bond movie." And he went, "Okay." And I think he thought, "I can't be another villain. I've been Voldemort for a decade." So I think he was relieved when I said it's actually his end, and surprised as well. So anyway, everything hung off that central idea. And once we determined that, the question was how far we could push the relationship between Bond and M, and how much he would show her of himself. It seems to me the strength of Bond as a character is how little he explains, how little he shows. And there's only really one person who understands.
How little you know about it.
His actual personal history, exactly. There's only one person who sees, as it were, behind the curtain, and that's M. And so she will see things in this movie that no one else will see, and then she'll die. And take those secrets with her, as it were. And that always seemed to me a very beautiful idea, so that's what we went for. I struggled a lot with trying to find a way to shoot London, because in my experience of watching London on film, London is not an entirely photogenic city, and also when you're when you know a city so well, it's very difficult to be objective about it. You know, you see it through the prism of your own experiences. So I had a week where I just walked around London and just had a look at things that I felt I knew. But I mean, I hadn't walked down Whitehall since I was a kid, you know, past Horse Guards Parade. I mean, just walked it, you know what I mean? Gone around St James's, in front of Buckingham Palace, and all those places that you... And I did see it in a different way, and I was awed by it in a different way. And one of the highlights for me was definitely when we closed down Whitehall, and I got to walk down at 5 in the morning, and it was thrilling, you know, it was an amazing, it was totally empty, sun coming up, you know, nobody there. And you do have those moments you think, well, who else, you know, in the line of one of the characters in Giant, who else gets to see shit like this, you know? And it really felt that way. And so I was very conscious of doing that. And we had to build a lot of it, the underground stuff, you know. But I read a lot about underground London, London under London, and you know, everyone here doesn't need me to tell you, but how many layers of city there are beneath our feet, you know, not just the underground, not just the sewers, you know, but you know, tunnels big enough to drive a double-decker bus through. I mean, stuff I saw over the city was extraordinary. You know, up in Finsbury Park, catacombs that stretched for miles. It was only accessible from one tiny little manhole, on which the set that the tube crash takes place is based on entirely. We've rebuilt exactly what's there, but it's in North London. It's just not accessible. You know, and the old mail train and the waterworks and the electricity that runs through shafts. I mean, it's amazing, you know. So that was all the pleasure of it. And then something else, a sort of zeitgeisty thing, also happened, which only really became clear to me sitting in the Olympic Stadium on Super Saturday, which I was lucky enough to get given free tickets by Amigo, this monster bomb movie. So I got freebies with my son and my dad and watched Mo Farah win the 10,000 metres, which has to be the single greatest sporting experience of my life. And I've been to a lot of finals. I'm a big sports fan. And that was the feeling around the country in the year, which we couldn't possibly have anticipated. And also the fact that Daniel was, you know, the headline act in the Olympic ceremony. But thanks to Danny Boyle, we had a very good warm-up act for the movie, and that was very unexpected. But it definitely affected, weirdly, my confidence in the Englishness of the film in post, because I just saw it, I sat through it, and I felt good about being English in a different way. And you don't need to, not in a sort of nationalistic frenzy, just a kind of certainty that the heart of the film was in the right place. And these little things affect you.
The film could project it.
Yeah, it was okay to go big when he's running down Whitehall. It's okay to show those Union Jacks when he's standing on the roofs at the end. Of course it's okay, but you know what I mean? It's a different feeling. I felt much more confident.
I thought...
And you can sometimes, I mean, Kazan, who for me is the great director of actors, makes the point that it is possible, it's not desirable, but it is possible to trick an actor into giving a performance on screen. You know, he doesn't always have to be aware of what he's doing, what she is doing. And you know, he talks about doing that with Monroe, and that ultimately he was just stopping her from being aware of what she was doing that was the key. So that's one interesting way. But for me, the job on a movie of this scale is different from the smaller movies, because in the smaller movies you're able to create a sort of room-like atmosphere, and basically it's a small crew, and you're in a house or a room or whatever. And so you know, being able to be intimate or give detailed direction to an actor is not that difficult. On a Bond movie, the job is to push the white noise, and there is a lot of white noise around you all the time, away, long enough for them to be able to invent and be creative and relax. And when I talk about white noise, I don't just mean the endless opinions, you know, the other drags on their time, the photo calls, the press visits, you know, but the general public, you know, the fact that there's constant, you know, sort of interest and sort of fascination with what's going on, and also, which I've never experienced before, trailers, which you probably experienced this, trailers being released before the movie's even finished shooting. So people already have a fixed idea of what they think the movie is. before you even know what it is. And they're reviewing the trailers, you know, and studying them in more detail than even you studied your own footage. That's happened before, and that is really weird. So again, all of that stuff, just to push it away and say, just take it easy. And you know, my thing with trailers has always been, use whatever you want that's going to make the movie look good, but don't think I'm going to put it in the movie, because a lot of the stuff in the first trailer, if you look at it now, it's just not in the film I just saw. But I just said,
It's the reverse also. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Sometimes exactly. Yeah. That works well. Yeah. But actually, that happened. There's a shot of him falling off the train on the bridge at the beginning. That's in the trailer. It's so good in the trailer. I kept saying to Stuart, we've got to use that shot. It's the helicopter shot that's come, and we tried, and we just couldn't make it work. It just worked in the trailer because it was held up against another shot, you know, from another part of the movie. So, the energy is all different. So anyway, for me, it's just about making space for people to remain creative, even though the movie's big.